If you think knowing the root of your patterns and your trauma is the way to breaking your patterns and healing your trauma, to changing your self-concept, think again, because overanalyzing your emotions might actually be blocking your transformation. Here's what you need to know and what you need to do. Hello, my loves. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Lorena. I'm a somatic self-concept and identity coach, and I help you to bridge the gap between who you currently are or perceive yourself as and who you desire to be or become. So there tend to be three distinct but overlapping, actually, reasons why people want to change their self-concept. Number one, they don't feel great in who they are and they want to feel more empowered, more confident, more secure in themselves, or they just have this vision of how they want to hold themselves and that's what they want to tap into. Number two, they have a desire that they don't know how to move towards or effectively make happen. And they know that the way they feel about themselves and who they are embodying is likely blocking them. And number three, they likely experience repetitive patterns in their lives, often in relationships, but it can show up anywhere. And those patterns feel hard to break. It feels like no matter what they do, it just keeps showing up over and over again. And sometimes it's a mix of all of the above. So when it feels hard to fully become the version of you that you want to be, or it feels really difficult to break that pattern, and it feels like patterns are repeating all the time, the culprit is your subconscious. It's what's in your subconscious. It's the beliefs that are so deeply ingrained within you, in your psyche, and sometimes they're so deep within you and so old that you might not even be aware that they're there because they're just a part of who you are. It's also the imprints from traumatic experiences that you've had, from things you've experienced in the past that you still carry with you. It's emotions that have never fully been processed, maybe because you've been taught not to express them. A lot of us as children have been taught not to express our emotions. Or even if you were allowed to express them, sometimes your nervous system deliberately makes you not feel something because it's safer in the moment. So that's how you get things like disassociation or freezing showing up. But that doesn't mean it's not there, right? All these patterns, all these subconscious beliefs, all these hidden emotions, they are still within you. And the way to break any pattern is to get to the root of it. But I want to clear up a big misconception when it comes to this. And that's that you need to intellectually know what that root is, because you don't. Getting to the root, and I say this often that we need to get to the root, that doesn't necessarily mean on a conceptual or intellectual level. It's on a felt level. It needs to be processed and it needs to be integrated. It doesn't necessarily have to be understood, let alone explained. That being said, awareness can definitely be helpful. If you know that there's a specific memory that always gets triggered in relationships, or you know that there's a certain belief system that has been established through a specific experience, maybe you know that in some instances, and then that's great. Of course, we can work with that. Sometimes awareness is a really good basis to work with, but I want to reassure you that it's not necessary. And sometimes you won't find out. You may never know. Some of the experiences in your life, some of the traumatic stuff that you've been through, you may not even remember. And when I say traumatic, I mean anything that caused a shock to your system. Anything that left a mark. And that can be in terms of the circumstances or the situation, an objectively or in your perception small thing. But it could also be something like birth trauma. It could be that you were left alone when you were in a crib in your little nursery room. And obviously you're not going to remember that consciously. Who remembers their birth, right? So in those cases, there's no point in digging. There's no point in analyzing because you won't find it from that. But that doesn't mean it's not here. It may still be here. The other reason is that it could also be a chronic thing that slowly built over time. Sometimes it's not this one big memory, this one thing that was the reason why I have this belief or why I have this perception of things. Maybe it's not just one thing. For a lot of people, me included, it's been a buildup of things over years and years. So then you can't pinpoint this one thing that happened. And we're complex human beings, and that's why it's often so difficult to get to the root, because it might be a culmination of many, many things. And the other reason it's not necessary is that it can actually be harmful, because it can lead to intellectualizing and analyzing your emotions in every little memory and circumstance. And that, to me, is the opposite of healing. And I see that in a lot of people. And it's well-meaning. But what intellectualizing and analyzing often leads to is that they either start identifying with their trauma, and they start turning into this victim mentality, or turning towards this victim mentality. Sometimes they become a diagnosis. They identify with the diagnosis. And that's not going to help you grow. Listen, I'm not saying that you're not allowed to be pissed off at something bad that happened to you. But identifying with your trauma doesn't heal it. It just makes it stick. And it makes you the victim of it. The other thing that can happen when you go into overanalyzing or intellectualizing your emotions and your trauma, and you try to find the root through intellect, is that you go into fixing mode. So you try to fix the trauma. You try to fix whatever it is that you find inside. And you keep digging and digging and digging, and it's this endless cycle of when am I healed? Now, before we move on, I do invite you to check out the links in the description box below. I've linked my free subconscious reprogramming masterclass replay there. It's one of my favorite masterclasses I've ever done. It's called Beneath the Surface. So it's going to talk about exactly that and a lot more other things about the subconscious mind and subconscious reprogramming in depth. But the intellectualizing and analyzing I actually often see in a therapeutic context. And listen, I think therapy is great, and in some instances it's really necessary. I've definitely had people apply for Recreate Yourself, and I've turned them away because I didn't think they were ready. I thought they needed therapy first, because for some cases therapy is better. But I also know a lot of people who have been in therapy for years, sometimes decades, and absolutely nothing is changing. They still repeat the same patterns. They are still stuck in the same identity. And they gain all this awareness about their trauma and about their past, but nothing is changing. They are still caught in the same thought loops and the same self-concept. They just understand it better. And that's great, but it shouldn't end there. Now, instead of overthinking and analyzing and talking everything to death over and over and over again, we need to resolve it. We need to heal it through the body, because you can't think yourself out of an emotion, and you can't think yourself out of a state. Through intellectualizing and analyzing emotions, you just tend to suppress them more without wanting to. It leads to pushing it all away, pushing it deeper and deeper into your subconscious, and it stays there. The healing happens, the resolving happens through feeling and processing and integrating in the body. You don't have to know the root of something to heal it. You really don't. I've had clients who have healed patterns and they can't trace it back. And I can't either. And we don't have to know. The subconscious isn't this intellectual part of you. It operates through feeling and being. I myself have recently shifted a pattern that came from a wound that I had from when I was a newborn. I wasn't aware of this. I don't actually know what happened, but I went into my subconscious, and that was a session that I received where I was the client, and I got to resolve it, and I got to heal it, and I got to process it, and that broke it. And now my reality has changed because of that. That's insane. I didn't have to know. All I know is I've changed. And it's changed, and it's not here anymore when it used to be. It's not holding me back anymore. That's all I know. I would love to know if you've ever felt that analyzing and intellectualizing your emotions has ever kept you from moving forward. Share your experiences. And in next week's video, we're gonna dive into attachments to an ex. Why we have it, what it has to do with your self-concept, how you can break it, why it's so hard to break it, and let's get you open and receptive to something new, to something that you really, really want. I'll see you next week.